Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree Buonomo and today I'm gonna do my November wrap up. If you're new here, this is the video where I talk about all the books I read, the things I wrote, and some personal life tidbits that might be interesting to you. So to keep this brief, let's jump into the books I read. Starting off, we have A Diamond Bright and Broken by Holly Davis. So this is Holly's debut novel, published by Inimitable Books, and Holly is an author tuber who has been documenting her journey for the last few years. I was really excited and happy for her to see her book come out. This is a YA Rapunzel retelling with sapphic romance and a lot of good representation. There are invisible illness representation and chronic illness representation. There's a lot of queer characters. There's a lot of BIPOC or biracial characters as well. So the representation was definitely like a great part of this book. And I kind of liked that bit the most because the rest of the story wasn't quite my cup of tea. I love Rapunzel actually. It's my favorite Disney princess movie. And this is very hardcore. Like if you like Tangled and Rapunzel, this feels like Tangled, absolutely. It hits kind of the same beats, like you have kind of the same trope of like kind of discovering who you are and kind of getting out of your locked castle per se. So it follows those beats pretty solidly. And if that's kind of like what you're looking for, I think this is like a great cozy read for you and it could be really fun. My main gripe with the book is just that I felt like the world building lacked a little bit for me. And this is because I do like a lot of heavy world building. I like things being a little bit more explained. And overall, I just wanted more. I wanted to know like how many different types of magics there were because we learn about these mages, the magi, but we don't really know the extent of them because our main character doesn't know. Like she is the Rapunzel character. She's being thrown out into the world, very naive, like only grew up like sheltered from her parents in her mansion, and she can cry diamond tears, and that's pretty much like how her parents have abused her. Like they have utilized her tears and her diamonds in order to create this massive wealth, and our main character feels like she is trapped there because her younger sister, who has a chronic illness and it is slowly debilitating her more and more, she feels like she has to stay there because her tears are providing all of the medical necessities that she needs. But outside of that, like the rest of the world kind of fell apart for me. I just didn't know like what type of setting we were in because it was a Tangled inspired novel. I assumed we were in medieval times, but we have a lot of modern language. Like we have modern language being used by characters when they interact. We also have things like talking about like gyms and like certain injections and oxygen tanks, which is fine, but I just didn't know where kind of setting we were in. I had a hard time grounding myself because they would be like using oxygen tanks, but then also riding horses. So I didn't know where we were in the world. And my last biggest gripe is just that I felt like we didn't have enough depth to the characters. They felt a little bit one-dimensional at times, and while I really liked the sister bond, the rest of the character interactions felt not as fleshed out. So while I can appreciate a lot of this, and I'm so happy for Holly, it wasn't the best book for me to read. But what I would say is I'm super proud of her for doing this and putting her work out there. And I think there's a lot of promise for her as a writer and an author. And I can't wait to see a different series from her because I don't know if I would continue this one. Next, for research purposes, I read Misery by Stephen King. I had intended to read this during October, didn't get to it, so I read it in the beginning of November. And this is a good book. I don't think it's my favorite. I think, and this is like a shorter, I think, Stephen King novel, I think he is so long-winded for no reason at all. I don't know about other people, but like there's just some things where like I just feel like he goes on and on about this shit and I don't care anymore. And many times throughout this novel, I was just kind of losing interest because I'm like, Paul, get your shit together. Like, so basically, I don't know if you guys know this, I have never watched the movie or read the book up until this point. So this is my first time experiencing misery. And you have an author named Paul Sheldon who has made these misery books. So Misery is the main character of his series, and a lot of women ended up very much relating to her and falling in love with her character and her story. So he gets into a car accident, and this woman who claims she's the #1 fan starts to take care of him, but it gets sinister very quickly, and she is not actually taking care of him, but pretty much holding him prisoner in order for him to write a new last book of the Misery series where he doesn't kill the main character. So it is definitely gruesome. There's a lot of gore and things that freaked me out reading it. There's also a lot of conversations about his penis, which I could care less about. Like, I don't even know why we had to use that word. Like, I know we joke when we read erotic romances how there's always, like, they use every other word except for penis. And I feel like I wish that happened here, because most of the time he was referencing this man's genitalia. We didn't need it. We could have just inferred it because it wasn't necessary. And every time it was said, I was like, what is going on here? It was just too much for me, you know? But otherwise, yeah, there's just a lot of like excess information that is just like meandering the plot. And I felt like we could have cut down just a little bit. Like, I almost wish this was a novella, because I feel like it would have been so much more potent if it was just condensed. So this is one book. I haven't watched the movie yet, but that is on my to-do list in the next month. I think this would be a great movie. I feel like they could cut out a lot of the bullshit and the fluff. And I know that this is like a really like revered movie, I believe. So I am excited, and this might be an instance where the movie might be better than the book. So do I think it's gonna be good for my own novel? No. The only plus is that my novel is going to have some kind of captivity part to it, and I don't think I'm going to get as gruesome as Stephen King did in his novel, but I can like call back to some of these scenes and be like, all right, like, how do I get into the mind of someone who is losing their sanity and I need somebody to escape from it, you know? So that's where we're at with this book. Speaking of the movie was better than the book, I read The Lovely Bones, and I'm not going to go into details about this because I am going to have a vlog on this book and a few others at the end of December. But this is a beloved book that was like a very big award winner back in the early 2000s, and it follows a young girl who is murdered, and you are following her as she is in kind of like a limbo heaven area, like looking down on her family and seeing their lives continue without her. I will have that full vlog out later in the month, but be sure to stay tuned for a more in-depth review of this. I finished There Are No Saints by Sophie Lark. This was pitched as a dark romance, and I personally don't think it's a romance. I do think it's more of a thriller. It's a really crazy thriller, and there are some really just one very intense, weird sex scene, but I would not consider it a romance, so I feel like this was misleading. The novel was interesting. It was very fast-paced. It's a short novel. You follow a serial killer who is a rival of another serial killer. So there's these two serial killers in California. They are both well-known artists. They're like nouveau riche. They're young. They're hot. They are very talented, and they compete, but on the surface, they only compete as artists, but below the surface, they are both killing people in California, and they haven't been caught. And then we have our main female character who starts to get involved with the two of them when a murder goes wrong, essentially. And you're following both of their points of views, and it's a wild time. I had fun with it. At the same time, I was wondering what the fuck was going on and why are things happening? And I basically suspended my disbelief. Like, this is a very unbelievable novel if you think about like it's set in present day and like these two idiots would absolutely be caught. But it was fun if I just suspended that disbelief. And yeah, I don't have much to say on it. It was a weird, interesting, but fun time. And last, I listened to Nightbitch by Rachel Yoder on audio. And this is a book where we have a woman who is, I think, in her late 30s. She has a young son, and she is trying to figure out who she is after motherhood. Because basically this is a horror with social commentary about women, motherhood, and losing your identity. And in this book, she was an artist who kind of put her career on pause when she had a child and is now just kind of losing her mind and believes that she is turning into a dog. So at night, she becomes the Nightbitch and runs around the neighborhood just kind of doing whatever the fuck she wants. This was a really interesting novel. I enjoyed most of the commentary. As a counselor who works with a lot of women particularly with children, this seems to be a theme that comes up for almost all of my women clients with kids. A lot of them no longer feel like they have an identity. They don't know who they are. They don't know where their purpose is in life. And it's a theme that we end up talking about quite often, about how do you reclaim your personality and do things for you? Like, how do you live your life, not just for your kids, but for yourself again? So I thought like the commentary was just really good, and I would want to recommend this book to a lot of my female clients, as well as just people in the world who might not feel like they have anything to claim as their own anymore. So it was really well done. I wanted to read the book when it came out, kind of forgot about it, was talking to my friend Autumn Ashley who read it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna go request it again because the movie comes out in December. So that movie comes out, I think, the week that you guys will be seeing this video. I think it's out now. And I do plan on going to see it later in the month. So those are all the books I read. Was a pretty good month overall. Heading in to my writing updates. I don't have a ton, to be honest. You probably noticed that I didn't post as much in November, and that was because, one, I was pretty sick. I got sick for the first 2 weeks after the election, and it was just a rough, like the first 3 weeks of November mentally, I was just a little burned out and exhausted. And there wasn't anything in particular that was making me feel that way. It was just kind of a combination of everything. And I think getting sick on top of that was kind of like, please slow down, take care of yourself, chill. So I had to do that. And that meant that I really wasn't getting into writing as much. And I was trying not to be guilty about that. But I will say I did actually write a completely new short story. It was a short story that is a continuation of another short story. So it's like set in the same world I had these characters in already for a different short story that I wrote earlier in the year. And it was set around Yuletide. And I really loved it. I will not know the results until I think they said February, but you did have to pay. So you paid to enter this contest, which is scary because it wasn't super cheap in a lot of ways. I believe the entry fee was $35, so that's relatively hefty for a contest, but you do win cash prizes for, I believe, the top 10 positions. The grand prize was pretty big. It was like $1,800 or something like that. And then it trickles down from there. So while it was a little bit scary to enter, I had a lot of fun writing it. I ended up entering with 2 other author friends, and we were swapping feedback and talking about our short stories and how to make it appealing for other people in like who would be reading this. So while I know that the contest won't be over until February while they're going through and having all the judges read it and give ratings, I am still very excited for that Yuletide story, and I hope I get to share it with people in maybe next Christmas, because it's not going to be available this Christmas and I'm not allowed to post it or I get disqualified. So I'll keep you guys updated on that, but I'm really excited to share that I did write a new story. I also edited and submitted poems again in November. I had previously written poems about my own neurodiversity, in particular ADHD, and how it can be very hard to navigate in my head sometimes, and how other people put a lot of projections on me and things like that. So I wrote those poems and they were very personal to me, but I never thought that I would be able to include them in my own book. Like if I was going to make my own poetry book, I didn't think they would fit in that theme. And I also didn't think I would write enough to make it its own book. But Beyond the Veil Press had a call for a disability anthology. And while initially I discounted myself because I was like, oh yeah, like I don't have a disability, then they made another post and was just like, yeah, like we want like you know, chronic illness, invisible illness, neurodivergency. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that does count. So I ended up submitting those poems. I hope maybe I'll have good news next year some point, but that deadline, so if you guys are still interested, I'll leave it linked down below. They are still doing calls for those types of poems till the end of December. So that's where we're at with that. And as I've already mentioned, it was kind of a rough writing month for me. And I did not touch vampire until the 30th. So the very last day of the month, I finally got back into writing vampire, and I live streamed for the first time in forever. Like live streamed where I was actually writing, because the last live stream I did was in June and I did a presentation. So I wasn't even working on anything. The puppies are coming to visit now. So despite not writing for most of the month, I was able to pretty quickly get back into my novel and start really hyping up the backstory of my vampire main character and kind of making comparisons and insidiously implying that he is manipulating my main character. Like, it's subtle, I think, so far. And obviously this isn't going to be my final draft, but I am definitely excited on all the threads I am posting. So we may not have done a crazy amount of work, but I am really happy with the couple things I did. I made 2 more submissions for this year, and I also now have more energy to dedicate to vampire. So last but not least, let's talk about some of the things in my personal life that you guys might be interested in. I feel like every time I start to think about like what I've done in the last month, my brain just turns off. I cannot tell you if I did anything exciting. Like, I know that I went out to a family breakfast, which was really great. I did participate in traditional Thanksgiving activities, aka going to people's houses to eat. The food was excellent, so I'm not going to complain about that. But mostly my month was just like rest and relaxation. I absolutely needed that for my own safety and my own well-being, but it really was weird. Like, I'm not somebody that likes to slow down, and I feel very guilty when I do. So I had to really challenge myself to be okay with being lazy, being lackadaisical, being just calm and content. So by the end of the month, but I was feeling good again. I felt like, okay, like I did what I needed to do. Nothing burned down, nothing went awry. Like, I was still able to function and maybe just not doing the extra energy things that I would always do. So that was most of my month. I have been diving back into older albums that I have been enjoying, and this particularly started because I was able to get My Chemical Romance tickets. My Chemical Romance is my favorite band ever. I've never got to see them live. I was always like too poor to go, or didn't have a ride to go, or they didn't come near me enough to go. So I never got to see them when they were like at their height, and that always made me upset. I basically like was telling myself, like, if they go on tour again, I'm going. It doesn't matter how much I have to spend. So the last time they went on tour, the tickets were insane at the get-go. Like, it was like $400 or $500 to start, and I couldn't afford that. So I worked with 2 of my friends. We all got in queues, like we were going ham, and I was able to get tickets to the New Jersey concert, the stadium at MetLife. I don't even care that I'm in the 300 sections nosebleed. I'm just so happy I get to hear them live for the first time. And while I love all of their music and I would love to hear a medley, I'm also just happy to be able to hear the Black Parade fully. So very, very excited. But because of that, I've actually been like, I started to just re-listen to their albums over and over and over again. And I've been going through all of them. So I'm just enjoying that. But I also started listening to some other albums. Like I was listening to Paramore's Backtracks. I was listening to Panic at the Disco's A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, which is still one of the best albums ever. I listened to some of the Fall Out Boy ones, like in particular, God Save Rock and Roll is one of my favorite albums too. So I was listening to that. That's just what I've been doing all month. Plus, like, Lady Gaga put out Disease, and I've been obsessed with that, and Kesha's Joyride has been really fun. So depending on what mood I'm in, if I want to just like be moody and sing, I've been putting on like the rock albums, and if I want to dance, I've been putting on a lot of pop albums. So I'm just having a good time. Wicked also came out in November, and I did go see it on opening weekend, And my God, it was just so good, guys. I cried several times. I got really excited every time. Like, I don't know, it was just so good. It was so good. I'm so happy it was so good because I think a lot of people expected it to be one of the biggest flops ever. You know, we got Cats that couple years ago. Enough said. But yeah, it was just perfect. I could really tell that the characters absolutely loved what they were doing. The guy who played Fiyero, amazing. Like, he just made his character shine, and Dancing Through Life is such a fun number. But really, like, Cynthia and Ariana were just perfectly casted. So I can't wait to see the sequel, the part 2, but I may end up going again to see Wicked because I had such a good time. I also watched 2 horror movies this past month. We watched Alien Romulus and Smile. So Alien Romulus is kind of like a reboot of the Alien series where you are in outer space and there's this ship called Romulus and Remus. Like, there's 2 halves of one whole ship, and Romulus was kind of abandoned, and these people are trying to get off their shitty planet and maybe find a new life. So they go on to the Romulus to maybe steal some parts, but things don't go as planned. It's a space horror movie and I loved it. I thought it was actually great. And then Smile is a horror movie that is very psychological, and man, oh man, did that freak me out. Maybe it was because like I was already in a weird headspace this past month, but it got me. Like, it was scary. And I'm not a huge, like, I don't always get freaked out by horror movies, but God, that was something. I will probably watch Smile too, but it was just a really creepy, creepy movie. So if you are in the mood to get, you know, scared a bit, I would recommend Smile. And that has been pretty much my entire month. I feel like I have been keeping it low key, kind of conserving my energy because I have some big plans for December, but I am not complaining. I think it was all worth it in the end. So let me know how your November went, any books you read, any things you watched or listened to, any writing updates that you want to share. Let me know down below. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.